Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for another episode of Inbound TV. My name is Ken, and today we're going to start talking about how to start testing, or actually the only way to implement a good test for your creatives. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been diving deeper into campaign structure, how to formulate a campaign structure for the year for your business, how to implement different campaigns through a monthly, weekly, holiday-based structure. And then once you think of campaign themes, how to then implement and execute a creative that aligns with that theme. What's the best way to bring that creative to life that matches the theme around that month or that season so that it resonates best with your audience. Now, once we figure that out, once you have your campaign theme in line, once you then take that campaign theme and create the creative, you should be actually diving deeper into creative testing around that. You shouldn't just create one creative and put it to the marketplace. A lot of people today have the ability to take creatives and execute really cost-efficient strategies to make sure that the creative that they're putting on a larger scale of marketing practices is really the best performer for them. So let's say you have one creative, you take that creative or that campaign theme that you base everything off of, and then you break that down into 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 50 different subcategories or small creatives that you're putting into the marketplace to test. What would be those KPIs that you need to understand in order to see if that actually does perform? How do you tell if a creative is best performer? How do you know that it's going to lead more directly to your goal from one creative to another? And then not only creatives, but when you're implementing social media strategies or other different strategies for search, you also have to have copy. How do you know that the copy and creative blend best performs to maximize your potential result for that campaign? A lot goes into making sure that you have the right creative for your campaign, but it's a lot more doable today to understand that you're maximizing your results and you're reaching your potential with your campaign than it was many years ago. It's also less cost. The cost is also more in line. It's very much more thorough to understand whether or not it does make sense to put a creative into the marketplace or it doesn't. So today you just have a lot more resources to be able to do that, mostly because of social media platforms and the way that content actually can be placed into the marketplace. So without further ado, we will dive into the creative process and how we actually start to test these things. So I actually have a little bit of a whiteboard here so that I can draw some things and you can see it as well. That's going to come up on the screen. And as I start to talk about the different campaign structures, one of the bigger things that you want to make sure you're understanding is your KPI goal. So your KPI is your key performance indicator. How do I know that a campaign is working well? Well, there's certain KPIs like a CTR, which is your click-through rate, or unique clicks, or total clicks. Let's say your total clicks was one of those indicators as well. But unique clicks is nice because it's a unique individual. Your cost per click might be a good way to analyze if a campaign is working, right? But the thing that you have to look at is what is working best to bring you down to your end goal. Is your end goal a lead? Or is it a sale, like on e-commerce or something of the sort? And how do you know that these goals here are driving you further down the line to bring you closer to your goal? Well, the one thing that I like to start off with is tasting a little bit more on the sense of creative. If I can understand and get a flavor of what creative is working better, then I can then start to test the copy that works best with that creative. I like creative to start with. I have seen other people look at copy first, but in my opinion, if you look at the way, and this is the reason why I like to test creative first, if you've ever seen a visual display of how the general consumer understands or views a Facebook ad, the main focal point is put upon the creative first, then your headline, then copy and call to action and so on and so forth. So your creative, if you look at a Facebook ad, it's the bulk of that actual ad. The image or that video, especially when you're in a 9:16 fashion and your video is your entire screen, is more or less the most important piece of it. So creative is taking up more of the screen. It's becoming more of the focal point in views, and it's kind of more important than other pieces of the ad itself, just because of how much attention it takes in from the consumer. So I like to test the main focal point first, which in my opinion is the creative. If you can test the creative first, then you can lead into copy and move forward with the rest of your testing process, which might be landing page or conversion rate optimization on landing page and whatnot. So to dive back in, if we wanted to test, let me erase some of this here. If we wanted to test our CTR if we wanted to test our creative, one of the things that I like to test first is the CTR, right? If the click-through rate on that creative is higher, that means more people are engaging with that ad to take the next step, which is most likely to click on the ad or go forth in that direction. The cost per click and the unique clicks are going to be directly proportional to the results of the CTR. If your click-through rate is higher, the more clicks you're going to get. If more clicks that you are going to get is there, most likely your cost per click is going to be inversely related. It'll go down, right? It'll get cheaper because more people are engaging with it and it's just becoming a more effective ad itself. So you want your click-through rate to go up, you want the number of unique clicks to go up, and you want the number of, or the actual dollar amount of your cost per click to go down. And the reason why is because if it becomes more cheap to get that click and you're bringing in unique good traffic, right? That's the quality of your traffic is important, not just bad traffic. But if you're bringing in quality traffic and your cost is going down, you're effectively getting more quality people to come to your site or to come to your landing page to then take that next step, that next action, whether it's to purchase or to generate a lead or a booking or whatever it may be. So we start with testing these methods here. I like to test in a traffic campaign on a Facebook and Instagram ad. It's just a little bit cleaner. The way that Facebook optimizes your campaigns typically is a little bit different by campaign objective. A campaign objective might be traffic, awareness, conversions, lead conversion, sales conversion, whatever it may be. Traffic is with the goal to drive the consumer to the next step, which is to the landing page or to the URL that you're pushing in front of the consumer. So if my goal is towards traffic and I know that the click-through rate is going higher from a creative, then that means more people are likely to click on that ad and I'm driving them to my result, which is to that page or that URL. So if I'm running a traffic ad, what I would like to do is analyze the CTR and the amount of clicks and the cost per click. Again, it should look just like this, going up on CTR, going up on unique clicks, going down on CTR. Going down on CPC. The next thing that you want to do is you probably have one campaign, which will then lead you to an ad set. An ad set here, you have a few different things that you can test. Mostly what you're going to test in your ad set is your audience, basically your geo demo, right? Your geographical targeting, your demo targeting. So interests, behaviors, which again goes to your audiences, right? Your budget. And then lastly, your placements. I'll put that up here. Your placements. Where the ad is on each platform, where it is just on Facebook or just on Instagram and third-party networks, things like that. So in your ad sets, you're testing all of this information. Placements, your audience, geo-demo audience-related targeting, and then your budget. For your first ad set, you want to keep it as general as possible. You really want to stay broad. Let's just say we want to do it on a $10 a day budget for the sake of this conversation, so $10 budget. And everything else should remain completely broad. Like, don't put interest targeting. Don't put, obviously, if you target certain geos, you want to put that. If you're not, don't go broad if you don't have the ability to serve broad. Your geo data is going to be still in your fulfillment area. So if you can fulfill nationwide, wonderful. Keep it nationwide. Don't select certain states. If you can only segment your traffic to maybe a 50-mile radius, great. Keep it to a 50-mile radius, but let all else remain constant. So again, you want this to be broad. And then here on your ad set 2, you can change one thing. Change one thing. That's it. That might be your audience. You want to target a specific interest. So we'll say we want to target an interest. Now what you're doing is you're testing your broad against, which should be your baseline potentially, against your interest. And then you can continue to do this as well. You can test another separate interest. You can test certain placements and so on. So that's how your ad set breakdown should be. Let me clear some space here. All right. Sorry, did we have a question, Ty? No? Oh, I can pinch and zoom. Oh, here we go. Ty's teaching me a couple of things behind the screen here. We can pinch and zoom to create more space. Let's see. All right, so if we have that ad set, right? So here's our campaign. Here's our ad set. Now off of our ad set, we have our ads. Let's say we have 4 different creatives we want to test. We can then implement a strategy where all of the copy remains the same, but our creatives are different, right? Our creative from each one of these is different. Now, you want to make sure that your budget remains the same or your reach or impressions remain the same, right? So you have to create a control. And I want to take a step back real quick. The most important thing to understand when doing any type of test is that you have to have an independent variable, a dependent variable, and a control. Your control is what's going to be that stagnant factor that can allow you to say, if both of these ads have X, let's say the same spend, or if they both have X, let's say the same reach, they've both reached 1,000 people, then I can assume that ad A performed better because the CTR was 17% opposed to 1%. Now that's a drastic difference, and if you do experience that, that's great, but most likely it'll be a slightly more narrow differentiation between the two. But if you do have a control, that will allow you to then create a hypothetical scenario where if all else remains the same and the only thing that's different is the creative, then I can come to a solution with this ad or this creative performs better. So you need to make sure you have a control here. The number one mistake that I see when entering ad accounts is that people forget to put a control. They run against the budget, and then they'll only test, let's say, $5 or $10 budgets. Budget testing and budget controls are good, but you also have to, I think, make sure that you test against audience and reach. If you serve the ad in front of 1,000 people, what then potentially happens? The reason why I like to serve based off of an audience control and not on a dollar amount control is because sometimes the dollar amount control can still inhibit the amount of people seeing the ad. Let's say it takes $500 for 1,000 people to see the ad or the creative in ad 1, but it takes $5 for 1,000 people to see it in ad 2. Obviously, there's a difference there, but if 1,000 people saw it, you can still analyze your CTR. But the problem that you're going to have with budget controls is that when you actually analyze, let's say you have $10 on your ad set level or $10 on your ad level, when you actually analyze how many people the ad reached, it might not be enough people to actually come up to a conclusion. If you only have like 72 people it reached, is that really enough data to really say whether or not that ad or that creative performed? That's why budget controls are a little bit difficult to deal with sometimes and might not provide statistically significant data. And that's really what you're after. if 1,000 people is your control, then I think that going forward, you could say, well, the same amount of people saw this and the result was different. So it's not the amount of people. The cost will be different between that, but the audience size remain the same. So in my opinion, the audience size and making sure that the same amount of people that see the ad is the control, that's a more important control than anything. So that's how you would want to place this. You would have your different creatives in each ad, and you would then take all of your creatives and test them against that audience. All right? So that's one way to do it. There are other ways to do this. Another way to do this would be, and I have seen this done pretty successfully as well, would be to create your campaign. And then have different ad sets. In each of these ad sets, you have your control. Let's say they're all going to be broad. They're all going to be $10, right? So all of these are basically the same exact ad set. Nothing changes. And then you only have one ad. Ad 1. Ad 2. Ad 3. This is a really easy way to do it right here if you're not using rules. If you're using rules inside of Facebook, or maybe if you're using a third-party platform, there's third-party platforms out there that allow you to create rules that interact with your ad accounts. If you're using rules, then this one can be done pretty simply with the sake of rules. Basically saying, I want my ad set to have this amount of dollars, and I want it to serve to every single ad, but make sure that it stops the ad or turns off the ad when the reach is 1,000 people. So then it'll turn this ad off, it'll turn this ad off, turn this one off, and so on and so forth. And then eventually all of them will be turned off when they reach 1,000 people. So you want to use rules for this to make sure that you're making sure that your control, especially if it's an audience control, is met to the standard that you're looking for. If you're doing it like this, and if you only make your control that dollar amount, then it's only going to spend $10, and then you can evaluate from there. So there's a couple of ways to set really your account up, and it depends on what control you're looking for. I have seen both of these work though, and they've both worked successfully. But test them based off of your audience, based off of your product and service. Test them both and see what one makes more sense. And once you take this out of a traffic campaign, test it against your lead or your leading campaign, whether that's let's say that's a lead gen campaign. So then you'll bring it down. Test it against a lead gen or a conversion campaign. And this is particularly for Facebook ads. So you want to test it against your main objective goal after you test it against your traffic, just to make sure that the results that you're getting inside this campaign structure or this campaign structure is directly correlated to the same as traffic. They need to be the same, right? If a creative is performing in here, it should also perform in here or in here. So you do want to test that against that campaign just to make sure that all of your data correlates correctly. All right. Now, what can you actually test at the ad level? Sorry, it's not ad set. That's actually the ad. What can you test at the ad level? Your copy, creative, your headline, also your hook. What else? Your call to action. These are mainly your different tests there. But when you test any of these, you really want to make sure, go up here, you really want to make sure you're only test one, right? Test one at a time. If you test more than one at a time, you're never going to be able to actually tell what one is working. Is it the call to action? Is it the creative? Is it the copy? Who knows, because you just changed everything. So you only want to test one variable at a time, and you also only want to make sure that you have a control that can allow you to gain enough data to say, if these things remain constant and I've only changed the copy or I only have changed the creative, then the result is better from doing that, then that has to be the reason that the results are better. So only test one thing at a time at your ad level. Make sure that you have a control and that when you're testing these things, you're really making sure that all else remains the same, because that's one of the biggest faults that I see. All right, that's mostly what we have to talk about today in testing creatives on any type of social platform. Now, here's what's really interesting in the world today. You can take this creative strategy and you could implement this process in social media, and you could effectively make sure that the results that you are gaining from your creatives and your copy and your call to action or your hooks and you're finding the best combinations of those to find your performance the best. When you find that best performer, and it might take some time depending on budget or time allocation, when you do find those things, you can then take that and you can exploit it. You can then use those best performers and put them on other networks like TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn or maybe even OTT CTV and run them as streaming type of creative to get in front of different markets or get in front of more people and expand your reach. So you could test today with a very driven social media strategy that's very cost efficient, and then take that, what's working on here, what is becoming your best performer based off of what the consumers interact with and what's leading further towards your goal, and then you could hit other platforms with it to then expand your reach. So where this is really beneficial is your cost efficiency, which has never been able to be done before. It would take so much more time or so much more funds in order to test in a way that this can be implemented. And once you do this, you just continue to drive further and further and further towards your consumer to create a deeper connection with the business and your consumer to then drive further sales or further lead flow and continue to drive revenue to new heights. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the comments. There's many different ways to test, but always remember making sure that you keep all else remaining the same and test one thing at a time so that you could really evaluate what's working, why it's working, and how it effectively yields a point of data for you to say that this is definitely a reason for this audience to engage with something more effectively or aggressively. And it becomes a lot more reasoning for you to have a deeper return because you understand the creative or the copy or call to action might be a result of that. So before we go, Ty, do we have any questions yet?
Nothing yet.
Nothing? Okay, cool. So if you have any questions, throw them into the comments. Would love to jump in here and answer some more questions. But now you understand how you can test them. If you are just jumping into this video, then you should check out the prior videos to creating a campaign theme and then cultivating a creative around that theme. And then once you have the creative, you have spin out more creatives around that theme, then you can start testing. So watch prior videos if you're just jumping into this one for the first time. If you have any questions, please reach out. But until then, we will reach back towards our creative process next week on our next episode of Inbound TV. Thanks for watching.